Well, hello, friends. I am on day 35 of my water only fast. So today I decided to make a video earlier. I think I put it off oftentimes, and I have something really brief I want to share with everybody. What I want to share is a lot more people are impacted by our lives when we choose to share our stories online than we may understand. So today was a good example of that. Now, throughout the 35-day fast, I started to share videos publicly on like day 12 because that was my previous longest fast. And I figured, well, this is a new territory. I should share what's going on. And I get some comments, I get some DMs, I get people to interact with me. But the number of people that have text me or come up to me and talked with me about the fast has been way beyond the number of people that have interacted with me online. So this is an indicator that when we choose as humans to live vulnerably and transparently and we authentically share our lives with people, the feedback loop that we get, this is assuming that you're not famous, right? If you're famous, then people constantly telling you that they love you and you can decide whether that's real or not. But as a real normal person that's not famous or trying to build some sort of major influence online, but just a person living their life as I would consider myself to be, the feedback loop on the internet is limiting. And there's a bunch of reasons. Like, I want to comment on lots of stuff I don't comment on because I just don't want to take the time to write. I don't, I just look at it, I'm impacted. And if I see the person, I'll say something. So how these people compensate, but today was different. Uh, our parents go to a church really close to where we live, and they're always asking us to come to church with them. And from time to time, we'll go. Easter is a good example. So we went today and surprised them and went and sat down with them at church. Father's Day, Mother's Day. These are examples where, hey, let's go to mom and dad's church and spend time with them. So we go into church. Over the decades of my parents being involved in this community, I've gotten to know lots of people at the church. But today, after the church service, I don't know, a dozen, maybe almost 2 dozen people came up to me and engaged with me and said, hey, something like this: Ian, your journey has impacted my life radically. Thank you for sharing your journey. I'm so, um, you know, encouraged by what you're doing. Or, Ian, my husband and I, or my wife and I, we pray for you every night that you'll have the strength to finish this journey. And so, what I want to share with all of you today on my 35th day is that it's really easy to feel lonely no matter what we're doing in our life. It's really easy to feel like nobody sees us, nobody acknowledges us, that even when we pour ourselves out, wear our heart on our sleeve, expose ourselves authentically, that maybe there's not the feedback loop that we might have hoped for. It's easy to not assume that our life is making the impact that it is. And so, what I want to encourage all of you with today is that my experience today is likely an example of what your experience would be like if you were to share your big ambition, right? If you're to share your big life goals, if you're to share your dream of being an Olympian, of building some sort of becoming healthy, whatever your big ambition is. And if you choose to run after this goal, and if you choose to expose yourself in this vulnerable, transparent way and to share your story, do not think that just because the views are low or the comments are low or the DMs are scarce, that that is all that there is. We live in a society where people have to weigh whether or not they want to take the time to engage in a comment, to engage in a DM. There's a pressure that if they comment, you're going to comment back, and then it starts a conversation. There's a pressure that if they DM you, you're going to DM them back, and it starts a conversation. Everyone is so overwhelmed and busy in today's society. And finally, even if nobody pays attention to my journey, even if not a single person is impacted by me sharing the story of what's going on in this fast, there is the opportunity for us as humans to journal our lives through this medium. So if nobody ever sees it, if nobody ever responds, reacts, or is impacted, just my ability to get me into a state where I verbally process what's going on in my soul and I have a chance to share it, if nothing else, is for me a journal of what this experience is. And even if nobody's interested in my journal today, even if I never go back and view, even if my wife, my children, my parents, my closest friends don't have the time to engage with it, or they go, it's just another day, Ian, whatever. How about future generations? We live in an era where we are documenting our lives in a way that has never been done before. I just watched Ed TV with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. And to think that Ron Howard and his team had the vision of what it would be like 26, 27 years ago when the movie came out in 99, I'm assuming it was filmed in 98, of what it would be like to follow a normal average dude and expose his life. And now we fast forward a quarter century, and many of us are doing this. We're exposing our life. We're jumping on Instagram stories. We're going on TikTok live. We're making YouTube. And so we've now entered this era of sharing our lives. Today's Easter. It's the Easter afternoon for me right now. I know in Asia, my friends are deep asleep, getting ready to wake up for Monday morning. But here in America, we're right in the middle of our Easter day. So let me remind all of you of another time where new technology came and people captured their life for the first time and the impact that we now have today. And this will be the final thing I share. When Jesus lived, he didn't have that big of a following. He had 12 disciples. He had 3 that were close to him. One of the 12 betrayed him. It was said that he had like 144 around the 12, so maybe he had kind of an extended group. And then when he would gather hundreds or thousands, he would say things that would offend people and they'd walk away, right? Like he'd have a big gathering and he'd say, if you don't love me so much that you hate your own self, you're not my real follower. And, people are like, wait, did he just say if I don't love him so much that in comparison I hate my own self, I'm not his follower? Like, peace out, I'm gone. And he'd take his crowds of hundreds or thousands and then he'd narrow back down to a dozen. He looks to one of his disciples and he goes, you're not going to leave either? And the follower goes, where would I go? You're God, you're the Messiah, you're the Christ. So in light of this, he never built an army of millions of followers. And today, people that claim to follow Jesus and claim to be part of his kingdom, if you include the Catholics and the Christians and the mystics, it's a couple billion people. So what started off very humble became very vast and profound. Now, during this time, Jesus used the technology of the day to get his message out. He used the roads. You see, the Roman roads were a new technology. And so he went and used the new technology of the day to reach people. But after his death and resurrection, he said to his people, go and make disciples of all nations. He didn't say go and make a disciple at the coffee shop or at the gym or at work. He said go and disciple nations. So, how did that play out? Now, obviously, his followers went and shared all around where they were from and beyond. They suffered greatly. So, a lot of people want to make Christianity like this cruise ship of glory, but it wasn't that for them. Just about all of them were murdered for not obeying the religious leaders and the political leaders, and they suffered greatly death. But what did they do that leveraged new technology? And how did it impact us today? And how do we learn from that now? And here's my declaration to you. Papyrus, what became paper, and ink, although expensive and hard to get your hands on, was a new technology of the day. The ability to get some sort of tablet or paper or leaf and the ability to get ink and a pen to be able to write things down was a new concept. This is why a lot of what we call the New Testament, the testimony of Jesus and his early followers, we call this, um, you know, this new declaration, what's called the good news or the gospel. And so this was shared through writing. So the person that wrote the most of this was a man named Saul of Tarsus, who uh, early in his career, he supposedly had memorized the entire Torah. He was one of the up and coming religious leaders. He was very zealous and passionate and all in on the Jewish faith, wanted to be probably a high priest or something of that nature. And so he saw Jesus as a threat. So Saul of Tarsus, he went around and he killed Christians. He imprisoned Christians. He was there when Stephen, the very first Christian martyr, was murdered and stoned to death. And he was traveling to imprison and murder Christians. Not necessarily a guy you think would become a foundational part of the church's growth. Nevertheless, he got knocked off his horse. The voice of Jesus apparently speaks to him. Why are you persecuting me? Saul of Tarsus says, who are you, Lord? And he says, I am Jesus, the one that you're persecuting. I have something different for you. You are now Paul. He changed his name. He changed his identity. And Paul went through the process of transformation. When Paul first started writing, he would say things like, I'm the least of the apostles, which is basically like, I'm the greatest. I'm in the top 12 of all humans in the world. Not super humble. Later on, a decade later, he says in his writings, I'm the least of the saints. So out of all the people that follow Jesus, I'm the worst of all of them. It looks like over time, Paul became more and more humble. He became more and more aware of his own frailty. And then finally, at the end of his life, he writes, I am the worst of all sinners. Amazing how the more this man followed after the creator of the universe and tried to seek after him, he had a higher view of God and a lesser view of himself over time. But the point is his writings. You see, Paul would sit and write, or sometimes he would have his proteges like Titus or Timothy or others write for him. And apparently, Paul had an issue with blindness that may have come from being blinded and knocked off the horse. And he would write. So he would use ink, he would use papyrus or some sort of thing to capture a letter. And this letter was precious, right? This letter was rolled up and it was delivered to the church of Ephesus or the church of Philippi or the church of Corinth. And then they would read it and they would write it and they would copy it and then they would send it to another church. You see, this was a time where Paul wasn't afraid of the new technology. I mean, how many people in faith are afraid of AI? How many people, whether Christians or Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus, how many people are looking at the new technology of the world and they're saying, whoa, 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 this doesn't look good. Where this man, he said, well, here's the new technology, the ability to write a letter, get it out, and have it spread. Where did this lead? Well, where it led was eventually Paul had somebody named Luke who was a doctor. And to be a doctor at that time, I imagine it took great diligence. And Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke by asking Matthew and John. And Mark, I believe, was Peter's protege. So Mark really told Peter's story of the gospel in his own words. So, and then he goes to the apostles and he goes to Paul and he travels and he gathers up enough information to tell the Gospel of Luke, which is the longest, thickest, most detailed gospel. And then he tells the Acts of the Apostles, the book of Acts. And this is what I'm getting to. You see, in the Acts of the Apostles, Luke tells the story of all of the followers of Jesus right when Jesus died and resurrected. And here we are today in 2025, still looking at the Acts of the Apostles. Why? Because Luke and his mentor Paul said there's new technology, the ability to write and spread a message out without having to travel. We're going to use this new technology to spread this message. And I often think that what I'm doing today is leveraging the newest technology in order for me to capture my story. And like Jesus, which I'm not comparing myself to Jesus, although I hope I become more like him every moment. But like Jesus starts not with a massive feedback loop, right? He starts with a small group of followers, but you look at his life and the way it's impacted over time. Like Paul and his mentees, people like Luke, you look at what they wrote, it only went to a little community of 10 or 100. Maybe it spread out to 1,000, but you look at the impact over time. And so one thing that we want to be aware of as humans is when we capture our stories, when we capture our essence and our life and our energy and who we are through things like this, it's not just about today and it's not just about tomorrow. We should be hopeful for future generations. We should be hopeful for humanity. We should have a vision that we will have great, 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 great grandkids. And one day they'll look back at the technology of today, the ability to live stream a video. And they might find it intriguing that great, 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 great grandfather, Ian Utility, was on a 40-day fast. I wonder what that was like for him to not eat any food. I wonder what type of spiritual clarity, emotional clarity, mental clarity, physical transformation he went through. And so in capturing things like this, it's not about just what is received today from the internet or received today when you go visit communities and get nice feedback from people. It's also not just the ability to only document for yourself, but it's also the thought of how might this impact future generations, because I imagine that was a great motivator for people that were telling the story of Jesus, who today most of the world stops, takes a pause, whether they follow him or not, they take a pause and take time with family and enjoy the holiday weekend that so many people are thoughtful and mindful of. But with that, I say peace to you. I hope that you are having or have had a glorious and wonderful Easter weekend. And if you don't share the faith of Jesus, I hope that whatever's going on in your life, in your community, is something that makes you feel alive and that you're thriving in your own ecosystem. And that until I come back next time that and share again, that you have a wonderful time and that your hopes are exceeded in all that you're going after. Till next time, friends.